Good evening. Welcome to Elyria City Council special meeting for Monday, July 27th, 2020 at 6 p.m. At this time, I'd ask everyone to stand up for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of reflective silence. Ms. Davis, if you lead us in the pledge, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I did that a little backwards. I guess I couldn't get back to my ways in City Council.
Yes, sir. Mr. Callahan.
Here.
Mr. Sarah.
Here.
Mr. Oswald.
Here.
Mr. Baird.
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Here.
Mr. Gillette.
Here.
Mrs. Davis.
Here.
Mrs. Keys.
Here.
Mr. Jesse. Mr. Stewart.
Here.
Just Mr. Jesse's absent. He has an excuse here.
Can I get a motion?
So moved, Mr. President.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell,
Second.
second by Mr. Sarah. Any discussion?
Question?
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
You are hereby notified in accordance with Section 3.10 of the Charter of the City of Elyria, Ohio, that a special virtual council meeting of City Council has been called for Monday, July 27th, 2020 at 6 p.m. A special meeting is being called to consider the following. An ordinance, first reading. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit pursuant to Chapter 1135 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, to BDC Builders and Developers Company, Inc., for residential planned unit development at real property located on Middle Avenue, Elyria, Ohio.
I declare this ordinance at its first reading. Public hearing scheduled for September 8th, 2020 at 7 p.m. Council chambers.
And then we have one other item under miscellaneous and unfinished business, the matter of appointing a new council person to fill the vacant seat in the Ward 5.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So we had an incredible amount of people who inquired about this position to fill Mr. Madison's 5th Ward seat, and we thank them for participating in that. There was a lot of qualified people over and through that. It was so encouraging that they want to, be a part of the 5th Ward, but ultimately be a part of the city and making those improvements and strides. And, in speaking with the majority of all the council members here, more specifically the Democrats, that, we feel we have a great opportunity, and we'll make an appointment here relatively soon. But I wanted to thank everybody for, putting their names in, their resumes, and still please come up to council chambers and make a part of helping us make some decisions that are going to be going down the road, because it's very important and for the involvement of our city and continue the improvement with that. So with that being said, Ms. Mitchell, if you'd like to make the appointment.
Mr. President, thank you. I'd like to appoint Diane Simmons as 5th Ward councilperson.
Second that motion.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell, second by Ms. Davis. Is there any discussion?
Call for the question.
Question. Roll call vote. Roll call.
Mr. Callahan.
Aye.
Mr. Sarah.
Aye.
Mr. Oswald.
Aye.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Aye.
Mr. Gillette.
Aye.
Mrs. Davis.
Aye.
Mrs. Keys.
Aye.
Mr. Stewart.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. If there's nothing more to become before this special meeting, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Sarah.
Second.
Second by Mr. Gillette. Any discussion?
Question?
Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. With that being said, I'd like to, welcome Ms. Simmons. Tomorrow I think they're going to meet with the law director's office. We're encouraged by her and excited about her appointment and moving forward with this. and we'll go from there. So, very good. So we've got a motion adjournment with that. So we're going to continue on with finance. Can we have a few-minute recess here if we can, Mr. Henderson, or do we just move forward with the finance? Keep it going? Okay. So those council members who are not on this committee, if they choose to leave, they can. If they don't, they want to leave, they're more than welcome to, and we'll fill you in on our meeting minutes. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, would you like to come over?
Sure. Probably easier if you... Okay. We're going to sit here? Okay. All right. So we'll continue on with the finance meeting. First item on the agenda is the approval of the June 29th, 2020 finance meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
So moved, Mr.
Moved by Mr. Baird,
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Any discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Item number 2. We've considered the memorandum of understanding between the FBI and the city of Elyria regarding the firearm range in Elyria, an ordinance authorizing the said memorandum of understanding between the city of Elyria and the FBI for use of a firearm range facility located at 851 Garden Street. Can I get a motion and get on the floor? Moved by Mr. Baird. Second by Ms. Davis. Mr. Firestein?
Through the chair to members of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to speak on this. Earlier this year, council approved a original MOU with the FBI to do a feasibility study for that area for the purposes of a range. Previously, EPD had talked about building a range, probably I think an outdoor range, and through some connections, being a center of the geographic region, there was a lot of interest from the FBI to kind of build more of a state-of-the-art type facility there to invite other departments and other agencies there to train and make it a one-of-a-kind facility that would attract people to the city of Elyria. So when working with them, the first MOU that was approved was just to do a feasibility study, and we are in the middle of that right now. So this is really chapter 2 of the evolution of that. So this MOU right here will kind of lay the groundwork with what will happen if the city is approved by the FBI to kind of continue that work. The reason why it's in front of you right now is sometime in August, the FBI has a few sites throughout the United States that they're looking at. And part of to be ready to be selected for that, we have to have all of our ducks in a row before we're ready to do that. So they go through their list, and for example, I'm not picking on Buffalo, but we'll just say they'll go to Buffalo and say, do you have the MOU approved, and are you ready to go? And they say no, we're still working on it. Then they're going to go to the next city. So whatever city is ready to kind of meet that objective. Now this is not a blanketed approval, and the next time you see us, we're going to have a huge range, and that's it. This is a MOU basically setting up the arrangement of how the relationship will work. We've worked with Law Director Derry's office, we've worked with engineering, and we've worked with finance as well to make sure that we're all on the same page. So really what this is an MOU basically stating that the city of Elyria is going to build this facility, and we're going to basically be reimbursed for almost all of the costs by the FBI, and we're going to go through our own bidding process. We're going to go through all the rules that you have always have gone through here. So this isn't the last time you'll see us. We're going to be going for other items as well. This is just to formalize that this agreement, and then that way when the FBI kind of goes to the city of Elyria and they're going to ask, are we ready to go? We can give them a thumbs up and say, yes, we are so interested, and we have everything signed and ready to go. That will allow them then to continue the process on their end to making sure that project is a go from their end. So this is what's in front of you tonight. Again, this just continues the progress that from the first MOU that was signed, and hoping that we can continue this great relationship and have something that attracts more people to the city of Elyria, and as a positive thing for the city. Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Gillette?
Mr. Chairman, through you, I think this is an awesome thing. This is a question of the chief. Have we covered the topic of reclamation for lead that will be, have we crossed all our T's and dotted our I's on the removal of lead from the facility?
Yes, that's a question that is asked across the country, and it's all part of what the FBI is setting up and what they're doing. And it'll come years down the road because it takes a long time to get there. But then you replace parts of the mound and that, and there are things set up through them where every year they have regular maintenance on the range, and that's part of that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's a great program.
Right. So when do we, what's the process once we get this MOU in line? And then how long before the FBI, if the chief knows or Director Firestein knows, as far as, what's our next step to keep things moving along? And do we anticipate maybe when we think maybe these things will all develop this? And I know there's a lot more steps to happen, I get it, but do we anticipate a timeline?
Through the chair to the members of the committee, that I don't know. This is us doing our part. And then when the FBI asks, are we ready to go? And then it kind of goes through their process. Sure. I know that they're excited about it, at least the Cleveland office is, but a lot of it's going to determine headquarters in D.C. But this allows us to say we've done everything on our end to be ready for it, and we will report back when there will be more progress made. But outside of that, I don't know. I know they make a selection sometime in August of what projects get moved forward.
Okay.
And after that, we will provide progress updates.
Sounds good. Very good. And just in the conversation with the law director's office, they are fully on board with it. They agree with the memorandum of understanding. Ms. Davis?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So is this location, you say, is 851 Garden Street?
Yes.
Does they take into consideration what is around those apartments and
Yes, we've been
the group
doing.
home that's down the street?
Pardon me?
Your location of the apartments that's there, and just right down the road is the group home and
Right.
detention home. And
Yes, it is actually closer down towards Murray Ridge on city-owned property already, and it's further away from the apartments. And we've already done noise studies through that area, and there was no issues with that. And it's a very good location as far as they come. And we've checked with the FBI. They have ranges that are in the downtown, like downtown Los Angeles. They have with it. This one is not in the middle of a residential area. It's near one, but it's not aimed at it.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Oswald?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So we're saying we got to get our ducks in a row. Do you have a list of things? Do you have a list of things? Is that me? A list of stuff that we have to do, like we have to first do this, we have to do that.
If I may, through the chair to the committee, essentially this is, at least for this chapter of it, you are my remaining ducks to get in the row. And then if we approve this, then we can say to the FBI, we're ready to go. And really, it's approving this MOU, allowing the mayor to sign off on it, and then we give that to the FBI. And then once they agree to the project, then we'll start the next chapter of what it looks like. So for right now, this gets us ready to go for the next chapter.
So basically, it was just like the size, square footage, position where it's at, which kind of opens the door for us.
Yes, that's what the feasibility study will answer that, and we'll be coming back then after that to do the bidding and all that, so.
All right, thank you.
Well, Director Deary, do you want to weigh in
Yes,
further?
thank you. I just want to say that the matter of this memorandum of understanding, my office has already approved this as to form. We've been going back and forth with legal counsel with the FBI for several months now, basically working out the nitty-gritty on several provisions, notably reimbursement, who's going to be responsible should this move forward, as far as who will do the contracting, who will make the initial payments, all those sorts of things. So again, as far as the form of the MOU, we're comfortable with that. Obviously, there's still, as members have pointed out, there's still a lot of for us to know as far as specifics, but what we've heard thus far is that this would be a state-of-the-art facility, and that it would be very secure, exceptionally secure, and in terms of safety, health, and quality of life around the surrounding area. And also, one of the things that I know from the point of view of our police department is that right now our officers have to go elsewhere to qualify, and there's occasionally a charge for that, and that would no longer be the case. Moreover, this would potentially be revenue raising to have this. Now, I'm not saying that all those other considerations should fall by the wayside. Those are also paramount, but that is something that I think is important for council to know.
Any further discussion? Call for the question. Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Item number 3. We consider the matter of the City of Elyria Coronavirus Emergency Response Funds in order to authorize the mayor to accept the said funds for reimbursement of expenses per the attached. The city was awarded reimbursement grant for activities related to COVID. I have attached the awarded letter. The reimbursements is for court security, items purchased for the municipal court, remote status pay for some individuals, and sanitation products. Can I get a motion to get it on the floor?
Move, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Mr. Baird,
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Director Firestein?
To the chair, to members of the committee, thank you for allowing this to be put on the agenda for this item. This grant came to us kind of towards the end of May, and then trying to find qualifying expenses that would qualify for the grant. Believe me, if you speak to some of our consultant on grants, we went up to the very last minute trying to find the expenses to qualify for the amount. So essentially, under this grant, we had a certain amount already allocated to the city of Elyria. We just had to find expenses that qualified under the grant to be reimbursed for that. So we worked with the municipal court when they had some extra need for security. Not only Elyria police officers, but also surrounding police departments were able to volunteer some of their time, not volunteer, but work part of their shift there to provide that. So a lot of the dollars for the security that provided by EPD, some expenses from the court system for sanitizing products, and then remote status pay for some of our clerical staff in the police department were eligible under this grant, and that's what we're seeking to be reimbursed. So we did it. The timeline was very quick, so I do apologize for applying ahead of time but I didn't want to miss the chance of being reimbursed, especially for expenses that we've already paid out. So this is simply authorizing us to sign off the agreement to then accept the dollars back to the city of Elyria.
Okay. Is there any questions for Mr. Firestein in regards to this? I guess one thing that I want to ask Mr. Firestein is, so is this all part of, this would not be a part of the COVID, which item number 7, or excuse me, item number 4 that we're speaking to? This is going to be something totally different, and with regards to that, is that all going to find? I mean, I guess my point would be, is this all kind of coming in line with what is going to be transactions happening here in the near future?
Through
Right.
the chair to members of the committee, no, these are two
Different?
Yes, very different, grants. Under federal law, we couldn't be reimbursed for these items under the COVID care, the CARES Act. So these are very separate funding, or separate expenses that we are looking to be reimbursed for those items.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just want clarification on that. Is there any other discussion? Ms. Davis?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Is there an amount that this reimbursement was? The purchase you've already spent, was it an amount that we should know about?
Yes, through the chair to members of the committee, the amount was about a little over $35,000. That was the amount allocated to us through some formula, and we basically had to find enough expenses to meet that. And I think we got all the way up to about maybe a few $100s less of that. And we had to provide the purchase orders and the payroll stubs and all that fun stuff, but we were able to pretty much meet that allocation to get reimbursed. So, but a little over $35,000.
So it's, just not to interrupt, but it would appear to Director Firestein, $35,635? Would that be the amount?
Correct.
All right, we will add that to the committee report, or I guess we could have it per the attached amount, or should we have it, make it part of the committee report?
Either's fine, so long as we have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. And per the law director, this would be an emergency action, so is there any further discussion?
Call for the question.
Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Okay. Well, yeah, and I guess this is with the law director. She would want to come up. I just have a couple questions in regards to the matter of how we have these here. And then John, Mr. Farrell would want to weigh in. Do we want to do the CARES Act at the end for the discussion? We have it as item number 4, but is there symbolic of how these have to, if we are creating a new special fund, or is that something for the engineering?
Mr. Chairman, the special fund can be removed. We don't need that item.
So item
As far
number
as
6.
the CARES, it doesn't, unless there's action this evening,
Okay.
it makes no difference to me.
Right. Because I know this is critical, how we have these funds that we're going to be dispersing here, and we want to make sure that we're having everything in line because of the dollar amount and the federal guidelines that we're up against. So we'll move forward with this at this particular time. And if we feel that, if the committee feels that we want to move forward with some of these items, I know the mayor I believe is here, and via virtual meeting, and so we'll have that. So the matter of utilizing the CARES Act funding. So with that, can I get a motion to get it on the floor? Moved by Mr. Baird.
Second.
Second by Ms. Davis. Mayor Whitfield, if you want to take the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Council President. I hope you can hear me okay. Can you?
Yes.
Okay, I don't want to be too loud, but yeah, thank you, Council President, to the committee. I hope all is well with you. I want to go through, I've sent you all a PowerPoint presentation. I don't want to talk through that with you all around this CARES Act money, but before we jump into that, I just want to congratulate Ms. Simmons on our appointment, and definitely want to give salute to those folks who put their name in. I was in their position and wasn't appointed, and I know what that feels like, but I just want to encourage them not to quit, as Councilman Stewart said, to stay involved. And, you know, in my situation, I believe God had something bigger, and I kept going. So I'm just want to encourage them to not give up. And results of this CARES Act money is a direct result of the advocacy work and the lobbying work that our office has been engaged with. I have Justin McCauley on the line with me, who's been a part of these lobbying efforts, not only in terms of our contacts with our senators in DC and our Congress folks, in DC, but also our state senators and state representatives. You know, we really, during this pandemic, when we received the notice from Rita about the potential loss, we really reached out pretty aggressively to our representatives saying, hey, we need some resources. And though these resources aren't perfect, they don't meet the need that we have as a city, it is a good start. So I'm gonna walk through this presentation with you all, and for not only you all had a chance to look at it, but also for the general public to kind of have some background information about this as well. All right, so Corey, if you stop sharing your screen, I'll go ahead and share mine. So this CARES Act funding, as I mentioned, is a result of a lot of lobbying work. So on March 27th, the federal government signed into law the CARES Act. Ohio received $4.5 billion of that CARES Act funding, and they allocated $1.2 billion for Ohio local governments. They had money that was directed towards bigger cities, but we really fought and said, hey, cities under 500,000 still need resources. So we fought and fought. They decided for that money to go from the feds to the state to local. And then the Senate had passed Bill 310, and that was moving along. There were some amendments that needed to be made, and they eventually on June 11th passed House Bill 481, which distributed $350 million to local governments. So just doing the math there's still $860 million that has not been distributed by the state of Ohio. So this is really just the first round of CARES Act funding, and the city of Elyria received $1.6 million of this CARES Act funding. So what's eligible? There's really three main things that guide the eligibility of these resources. The first is that these were expenses necessary due to COVID-19 in response to it. It can't be things that were accounted for in the most recently approved budget in March. It can't be items that we had already budgeted for and we're just using this money to replace it. And it has to be for things that were expenses that were incurred between March 1st and December 30th. What's not eligible, these funds cannot be used to fill shortfalls in revenue, so we just can't use this for revenue replacement. It can't be used for expenses for employees whose work duties were not substantially dedicated to mitigating the response to COVID-19. And again, it cannot be used for revenue replacement. So we had a chance to sit down with the department heads, Derek, Kevin, our team sat down with departments, really talked to them about what their needs are, talked about how they've been responding individually to COVID-19. And there's really these four priorities we came up with in hearing response to this. And we also have been getting some feedback from the courts about some of their challenges as well, which we feel like they fit these categories as well. The first is around city staff and operations. So there has been some changes made, and we need to make more staffing changes to make sure that people are able to work virtually, that even the way you're set up now in council chambers, we need to change the way that is. We need to make sure there's dividers between yours. So we really need to outfit our workspaces in ways that allow us to practice social distancing, and when we can't, have the proper protections in place. We also need to have staff people dedicated to cleaning and sanitizing our public property. So our playgrounds, our buildings that other folks are working in and out of, to have a team dedicated to that. And make it so that residents can still access services. You know, one department that immediately comes to mind is our building department, where we still have people needing to come to City Hall, enter City Hall, to exchange a document that could have been submitted digitally, but we haven't had the infrastructure for people to submit and pay online through building department. So putting resources towards that. The second is around small business assistance. So we know that small business has been struggling during these times, and these resources are a little more loose than what our restrictions were on our CDBG small business dollars. These can actually be used for assisting businesses with reopening, reconfiguring their operations, or businesses that are responding directly to COVID-19. So we think that's another chunk where we should dedicate some resources to. The third is around emergency financial assistance. So you'll hear from Director Deb Connor later. She'll talk about some of the issues with utility assistance. So we think we should dedicate some resources to help our families that are out there struggling in the city to be able to meet their basic needs with rent and utilities and who are behind. So to provide some emergency financial assistance for those residents. And the last piece is essential services for residents. So not only folks who are behind, but as you can see from the everyday increase of this virus locally, we're in this thing for the long haul. So we're going to need to really think about, our seniors and individuals as we become more reliant on technology, making sure that we're equipping residents with the skills and training and technology they need to be able to leverage and utilize and exist. We're going to become very heavily reliant as a society on technology. So providing those essential services to residents to make sure that that their lives are supported, that as a city, we support their lives. For some folks, their jobs may not come back. So we want to make sure we have some resources dedicated to retraining, reskilling our residents, to making sure that they don't get left behind during this pandemic. And then other potential and unforeseen expenses, those miscellaneous things. So for instance, we've been talking about pop-up testing and providing COVID testing as a city. We were able to do the pop-up testing back on June 19th, and we had over 670 folks come get COVID testing. And so we saw that there's a huge need for people just to have the peace of mind when to get tested, but that there's a need in the city to have that consistent testing. So we've been already in conversation with the health and dentistry, and they're ready actually on the second week of August to be able to have dedicated testing for Elyria residents utilizing these resources. So this is very important that we start to move this forward. And a lot of these concepts came from my dialogue. We're a part of the Ohio Mayor's Alliance, which has the 30 largest cities around the state. A lot of these ideas come from conversations with my colleagues and how they're utilizing these resources, as well as talking with some of our local mayors as well. So how could this look? One way this could look, and Derek will speak to this, in terms of, we think we have a public properties team we can develop and make them solely responsible for making sure City Hall, Central Maintenance Garage, any of our public properties, our playgrounds, et cetera, are being sanitized and maintained, and their full role will be responsible for assisting with this, mitigating the spread of COVID-19. The small business assistance, Dawn can speak to this, but this is really about thinking about what we did with the micro enterprise program with the community development block grant, and really just investing more resources into that. The emergency financial assistance, we can talk about that. We have some options to be able to do that internally through our utilities department, or working in partnership with an organization like the Salvation Army to increase the amount of financial assistance available. And then the essential services, that's going to look very different depending on if we're talking about food with Second Harvest, or if we're talking about reskilling in partnership with Lorain County Community College. So initial allocations, there's these three main buckets that resources can go in. Keep in mind that anything over 50,000 will still have to come back to City Council for approval. Any major contracts will still have to come back to City Council for approval. So, but these sort of buckets we think are where the main needs are: salary and wages, operations and maintenance, and miscellaneous. And each one of the categories we talk about fits into these chunks here. And so some of the eligibility guidance that aligns with these priorities inside of the guidance that's available on the U.S. Treasury site, it talks about the ability to use these funds for disinfecting of public areas. It talks about payroll expenses for services that are substantially dedicated to mitigating or responding to this COVID-19 crisis, expenses to improve telework capabilities, expenses for food delivery to residents, expenses to facilitate distance learning or including technological improvements. So this is also a way that we can assist our schools. So as that tech gap starts to happen in communities, if grandma is watching the kids, how can we make sure a grandma has the resources and the tech capacity to be able to have those young people not get left behind in school? Expenditures related to the grants to small businesses, and employees who have been furloughed or otherwise laid off, but who are instead repurposed to perform previously unbudgeted functions. And we think we have a team of folks already identified who would have been laid off, but we've been trying to direct them toward another service, and we think this is a great use of resources for that. So I'll pause there and let Derek kind of speak to this team that we have and how we hope these resources will help us. One, it's going to relieve the general fund, but also really meet a COVID-19 need.
Thank you, Mayor. Before Director Firestein speaks, does anybody, I know we're just kind of gathering this information now and looking at it. Any questions for the mayor now with just those initial comments that he had and maybe what their thoughts are? Mr. Gillette?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mayor, the first question is, these grants towards business, do the businesses have to use their grants for COVID-related items? And let me I'm going to throw out a couple hypotheticals. If McDonald's or Burger King, any fast food restaurant, would like to set up a new online system for ordering because their business has been impacted by COVID, would that be an applicable grant request? And the second part of the question is, who is in charge of approving these grants on behalf of the city? I understand that anything over $50,000 comes back to us, but if it's a $15,000 grant to a restaurant to set this system up, and again, this is hypothetical, who approves that type of grant? And I'll listen now.
Yeah, through you, Chair, and thank you, Councilman Tolet. So that's a great question. So what we're proposing is that we use the same structure that we use for the micro enterprise CDBG program, which is we take in applications. Those applications will come to the Economic Development Committee, which we have a vacancy, so we need one more council person on that committee. But I believe Councilman Stewart sits on that committee. Councilman Baird may sit on that committee as well. So they would be folks reviewing those applications, and once they're approved, then it would be able to go out to the business. But it would come into the city. We would vet, make sure they're even feasible, bring those to the committee. The committee would then approve, and then the resources would be dispersed. And Councilman Stewart, am I correct that you're on that? You and Councilman Baird are on that committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you are correct.
We do have a vacancy now with Councilman Madison being gone.
Right. So we will make that appointment here soon with that. We'll set up a conversation with you in regards to that. So who is going to be, Mayor? Thank you, Mr. Slade. Did you have anything more to follow up? So who will be the point person for the funds? Like, since this is a vast amount of money, who is going to be, to make sure there's a checks and balances, that we're dedicating funds that we're in line with how they're being distributed, that we're in 6 months from now, we're not going to be, questioned by the federal government saying, wait a second, this doesn't comply with how we're having this, so that, we're going to have to return this money.
For sure. Thank you, through you, Chair. And one immediate assessment is the city has great controls in place right now for getting resources out the door. Normally, before any money goes out the door, it has to go through Ted's office. It's going through Amanda's office, and then the dollars are getting out. There's very tight controls in place right now to make sure things are reviewed properly before they get out of the door. So the process would be the same as if we have any other grant with stipulations, that we make sure we put our ducks in a row, we review it with the law department, we check with finance to make sure they're comfortable with the allocation based on what the use is for, and based on that, then would move forward.
But who from the administration would be your point, and have those dialogues with Ted and Amanda and that? Is it just your team, or is it?
Yeah, primarily Derek. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions in regards to the mayor in regard to that? Okay. Director Firestein? Oh, I'm sorry, Judy?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just curious, can some of these funds help us get City Hall opened at some point, sooner rather than later?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councilman Keys. Yes, no doubt. We talked about that this morning, needing to really have a reimagination of City Hall and what people come to City Hall for. A part of we have a lot of challenges the way City Hall operates today. there isn't a specific check-in area. If you go to a city like Lorraine, you check in, there's a metal detector that gives you a chance to check if someone has a mask, check their temperature. It really gives you that checkpoint. We don't have that currently. So a part of our redesign has to take that into account. But one thing we've talked about is really thinking about who's been missing City Hall being open. You know, and we want to make it, our first priority is to make sure if people don't feel safe coming into City Hall for health reasons, or feel safe going in the indoor spaces, how have we made sure that they can handle their business technologically? And once we cross all those boxes, making sure then that we make City Hall feasible for folks to come through. You know, one concept we talked about earlier today was about entering and exiting. So in many spaces, they've now changed the way you enter and exit so that you enter in one door and exit out another door. And so we talked about what would that configuration look like to have a dedicated entrance, and then people would have to go around and exit out another door. And how do we keep people from going upstairs? So, you know, there's a lot of pieces that imparts with City Hall, but definitely these resources can be used to help with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Director Firestein.
Thank you, Chair, to the members of the committee. To kind of go off a little bit of what the mayor just said in response to Councilwoman Key's question about reopening City Hall, we did have, as promised last time when we met, we did have a meeting with some of the department heads within this building to talk about the challenges that they face of, you know, what they expect to see, what happens when City Hall, you know, when it reopens, and, you know, what their fears are, what their worries are, because we want to make sure not only are our coworkers safe, but also when the public comes in here, what are they experiencing and why are they coming in, and figuring out how do we keep people safe. And so a lot of those discussions centered around when this grant became, not grant, but when these funds became available, that's going to parlay right into kind of the CARES team that was kind of mentioned earlier. And so we want a team that's going to be going around sanitizing different public spaces, public facilities. When you sit back and you think of all the different facilities and equipment that we have for the city, it's a lot of places to make sure that we sanitize. A lot of people have interactions with, and making sure our residents are safe, our customers are safe, and our coworkers are safe. So a lot of this team will be a lot of their time will be substantially dedicated to making sure that those areas are sanitized a lot more frequently than the typical cleaning of the building, making sure that we're, you know, cleaning off surfaces, making sure we're sanitizing places. And so those salaries that you see there are going to be extremely dedicated to that, and making sure that places are maintained, making sure places are clean, which will result back into the plan of when we do reopen City Hall, making sure people feel safe when they come to visit, and making sure that when they do come, they're here for a reason, making sure we make them feel comfortable in doing that. And so that's a big part of it. And with the plan, with the CARES team that we kind of keep calling it, we're going to formalize a little bit more, but that seems to be the moniker that we're going with right now. We're looking for current staff that we have to kind of bring them back to where they originally were. And we have a few people identified. We're going to wait to make sure that once it's approved and approved by council, we'll make sure we put that in a more formalized action. But we have identified some individuals, and we've been working with Director Brubaker on how that plan looks and the job descriptions attached to that, and making sure that we show that they are substantially dedicated, making sure we comply with this, and then the procedures in place, and making sure that we look at timesheets throughout the week, making sure that we check their hours, because the fear is, I think it was mentioned earlier through Chairman Stewart's concern was, okay, we do all this, who's tracking this time? Who's tracking the dollars that we spend? Because what we don't want is, you know, an audit to look at saying we misspent the funds and we have to pay that back with general fund dollars. I mean, that's what we don't want to have happen. So we will be on this. We're going to be checking it, but that's part of the plan of not just City Hall, but the other facilities that we have, making sure that when people go there, they're safe, they feel safe, and we're doing our part to make sure that they are safe.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there is a drop-dead date of when we have to use this money or lose it. What is that date, and is that a budget that has to be submitted by the date, or do we actually have to have expended the money by the date? Thank you.
Through the chair, to members of the committee and anyone else that is able to speak to it, correct me if I'm wrong on this. but we have to spend these dollars by the end of the year. I believe December 31st is the cutoff. We could budget it whenever, but we have to spend it. It doesn't matter if we budget it now and we go, to January 13th, that December 31st is the cutoff. So we have to spend these dollars within this calendar year. If not, any unused funds are sent back.
Thank you.
Thank you. And please correct me, anyone please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's what my...
Mr. Farrell, did you want to add anything to that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yeah, the money has already been posted. It's in the bank. We've received the money. Now it's a matter of appropriating it to these different departments, and then, yeah, December 30th is the deadline, so.
Okay. All right. Mr. Firestein, did you have anything more to add in regard to that?
To this topic, no, but I am obviously will be available throughout this meeting as we talk on the other topics to help provide any input, but you're going to hear from some other people as well. But I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
And through you, Council President, there's a couple more slides and then I'm done, and I wanted to give Dawn a chance to speak to the small business piece. So Dawn, I'll let you go ahead and then I'll finish off these slides and then I'll be done rambling about this.
Thank you very much. So I wanted to go back and address a couple questions for the sake of clarity. Councilman Follett, you had asked the McDonald's scenario, and I wanted to just make sure everybody was aware that this is for small businesses as defined by the SBA, so that is 500 employees or fewer. So in the instance of McDonald's, if it's McDonald's corporate, yep, they got to go to McDonald's. If it's a franchise owner, that is something that we would look at internally through the Economic Development Committee for approval. Also, this funding has a lot fewer restrictions than CDBG funding. However, because we have to be accountable to the federal government for those expenditures, and we have to have the record keeping, we're going to be working very closely with the Community Development Department on all of the subrecipients that get awarded through the CARES Act small business funding. So we'll be working together as a team to make sure we're tracking that, the application process, and that we have all of the required documentation that we need going forward with that. Now, you'll remember that a couple months ago, you approved the CDBG Small Business Assistance Program. So we're going to have quite a bit of funding available to help small businesses. We want to make that process as easy as possible for all the small businesses in the city of Elyria. So together, myself and Mona and Ashley in Community Development will be filtering those applications to say who qualifies for the CDBG funding, which has more restrictions on it, versus who qualifies for the CARES Act funding. So we'll be helping behind the scenes to sort that process out and make it as easy as possible for the end user. We want to make sure we get them the assistance they need as quickly as possible, as they're really struggling through a lot of challenges right now. So a couple differences I wanted to share is that the CARES Act program is a cash grant. The micro enterprise or small business assistance program through the CDBG is a forgivable loan format, and that has the low to moderate income requirement attached to it. So there is no maximum amount we're recommending for the CARES Act funding. We want to look at that with the Economic Development Committee and make sure we're meeting as many needs as possible. This is a unique opportunity to help some of the larger employers in the community that sometimes the way the funding works, we haven't been able to help in the past. So we want to make sure we're as inclusive as possible and looking at all the businesses that really need our help in the city. I think, any other questions about the program for me?
Ms. Davis.
Through you, Mr. Chair. With the small businesses, how am I going to know that you have this money available to help me? Do you have a process of, putting it in the paper, or how the community going to know? And Is it only for Elyria?
Great questions. Let me answer the shortest answer first. Yes, very strictly, only Elyria businesses. The longer answer is, how are we going to make sure people know about this program? We will be promoting it on social media, through our networks, by email. So I actually have a list of business owners that have shared with me that they need assistance. So I'll be direct emailing them, but we'll be working with our partners like the Small Business Development Center at Lorain County Community College, as well as Lorain County Chamber of Commerce, and then all of your networks. So please refer them, send them my way. I'd love to talk to them. If they don't fit into one of our programs, we may be able to help find them another resource. So there is a lot of support for the business community out there right now. Jobs Ohio is a great partner of ours. They actually just emailed me today. Dawn, do you have any businesses that need PPE? So please, if you need those, you know, if you have any business that's running up against any obstacle, please send them my way, because even if we don't directly have a program within the community, there probably is a program out there to help.
Thank you.
Well, I'll say through you, Mr. Chairman, but, so let's just say they fill out their paperwork and they want $50,000. Well, that doesn't mean they are going to get 50. Maybe you'll say, we can give you 30. Is that how it would be? You would do that kind of talking around amongst yourselves and
yes.
say, well, you could dish out?
Yes, correct. So that's a great question. It has to be related directly to COVID. So this can't be an expense of, I want to buy a new HR software suite just because I was going to buy one anyway pre-COVID. It has to have a demonstrated COVID need. So they are going to have to submit that documentation and make their case for why this is COVID related. We, as staff, will not be making that decision on our own. We'll be working through the Elyria Economic Development Committee to make the appropriate decision on how much money. So again, it has to be tied to a demonstrated need related to COVID, and then of course the oversight of what seems reasonable. We didn't want to put too many restrictions on this because this is one of those rare times where we don't have 25 pages of rules on how we can use this funding. So we have some built-in flexibility with the program, and we really want to take advantage of that so we make the right decisions for the right businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Just getting back, a big concern for me is the salary and the wages. I got to be honest with you, is making sure that we're in compliance with what we have and appropriating those individuals and making sure that we're in those right lanes, that we're able to do what we're doing. And, you know, for example, if we're going to be here opening up the building, you know, what does that look like as far as the sanitation crew to come in here, or a cleaning crew to sanitize everything and coming through it, or council chambers here and how does that all fit into this? That is a big concern, I think, for myself. Just making sure that we're dedicating these dollars and we're falling in line with what we need to do.
Through you, Council President, that speaks to this last slide I have, and then I'm also going to let Justin McCulley, who's been helping us with our government relations, kind of add some context to this as well. But one of the key things, so I've been living in this CARES Act world for the past 3 weeks of just webinars, meetings with, you know, the budget management, with the feds, with all different type of groups, just trying to get as much ideas and much, you know, as safe as possible. So some of the key points that stood out in the last presentations I've gone through with the Ohio budget management is documentation is key. Timesheets, job descriptions, ordinances, even just making the case clear why these expenses are helping to mitigate or respond to COVID-19. And so once the dollars are allocated, as Derek mentioned, there's going to be a whole thread that follows that of getting that team together, training them, getting job descriptions clear, and you know we'll probably come back to you to make sure that you all are clear. Hey, this is the team. Hey, bring the team in. Hey, this is the team. This is what they're doing, and really to make sure that we're documenting. But that's a key piece. Another key dynamic to this is that more money should be coming. I mentioned they have $1.2 billion, $1.2 billion to be allocated to local government. They've only dished out 350 million. So there should be more funding on the way. The hope is that with this next act, hopefully the next stimulus act gets passed here at the federal government. You know, they're talking about CARES Act Part 2. With that funding, they're going to loosen up some of the restrictions. That's the hope. That's our advocacy work that we're doing now. So I encourage you to, if you know, have a relationship with our Congress folks and our senators, give them a call and let them know, hey, we need more money and we need less restrictions. So we're hoping that they address that in this next CARES Act, that they'll actually loosen up some of those restrictions. And then we mentioned spend or encumber. But Justin, if you could kind of add some context to this as well. You're working with other cities around the state on this issue as well. If you could add some context, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Chairman and committee members. One thing I wanted to add in the Office of Budget Management guidance from the state of Ohio, there are a couple other dates. There's an interim finance report due on September 30th. And I think that will be an important milestone for the city of Elyria to ensure that we have been doing everything as outlined by the law, both at the federal level and at the state level. And we would have a very clear understanding when we submit that report with the feedback that we get. Another important date to note is October 22nd. Based on the interim reports that the state of Ohio gets at the end of September, there may be money left over that will be redistributed from this initial $1.2 billion. So if there's money in Lorain County, in some other community that goes unused or for whatever reason comes back to the county treasurer, that money could be redistributed to other communities that need it and are using the money appropriately. So even in this $1.2 billion, the 350 million of the $1.2 billion initially, there could be more money. But as Mayor Whitfield said, there's 850 million more just in the CARES Act. Plus there is this additional stimulus bill that both Republicans and Democrats, I think, are interested in seeing pass at the federal level prior to an election in November. So I am certain that there will be more money coming. It's important for us to stay abreast of those topics, but also to make sure that we are, as Director Firestein said earlier, and as Mayor Whitfield said, we want to have our ducks in a row. The more organized we are, the more cooperative we are with, among ourselves internally with the Director Deary in the Law Department and Director Pileski in the Finance Department, but also advocating and collaborating with our state senator and our state representative and both of our U.S. senators and our congressmen. I think we will have more success ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that, Justin. And again, I thank you, Chair, for the time, and I hope that that we can allocate. I'm asking you all to consider allocating those dollars today, with knowing that it's not like we can spend it without you anyway. So just having the allocation allows us to at least get these movements started within the city, and then we'll continue to work together as we have on every other bit of resources that have gone out the door. But at least so we can get the ball rolling and start to have some of these low-hanging fruit to start to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, very good. I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to ask Mr. Farrell, John, if there's any other questions that you have that we need to get clarified or verification or in regards to what's being proposed here for us, because your office is going to be really inundated with this on top of,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear that someone's aware of these other dates. because we don't want to be sending money back that we haven't spent. Other than that, just on the individuals in the payroll, what's different about their roles? And that's going to be critical, is tracking that. So
I guess a question here maybe is what job are they doing different now that they weren't doing prior to this COVID, that we're going to justify the salaries?
Right. So through the chair to the members of the committee and to the finance department, a lot of it is, before their responsibilities were cleaning the facilities, maintaining the facilities, but it was done on a regular interval. Whereas now sanitizing has become such a big part of it that we're going to be doing it so much more than we would. The example I had in my head I don't think is overly appropriate, so I won't share it. But what I'm trying to say is the ability to substantially dedicate their time to sanitizing the area. You know, doing it once a week would never suffice in the climate that we are in now, the environment that we are now. You know, if we're doing it once a week, no one's going to feel comfortable going there. But if we do it on a continual basis and showing that we are out in front of this and doing this, so a lot of that time throughout their 40 hours for the week will be tied up, a lot of it, to sanitizing more than they have before and getting trained on it and making sure that we are staying on top of it. That's where I think that we can show that tracking, and where we're going to show, working with Director Brubaker and looking at the timesheets and making sure that we're allocating and tracking that time to show documentation. We realize with federal funds, I mean, working with block grant and working with any other type of federal fund, they're going to require documentation. They're going to hold us accountable. And so my thought is that by not allocating these dollars, or maybe being fearful of that at the end, is going to prevent us from even trying this. And my worry is if we say no to this, what does that look like then? What's that alternative reality then if we don't have these dollars available to us to at least try and see? And, you know, finance does a good job at holding us accountable, and that's their job. Their job is to count the dollars, make sure the rules back up that, and they're going to be our in-house auditors to making sure we're doing that appropriately. And I have a lot of faith in Mr. Farrell and Director Plesky in doing that, and same thing with Director Derry's office. They make sure that we follow the rules to the best of our ability, and making sure that and when we don't, they slap our hand, and rightfully so. That is their job, is to hold us accountable. And having faith in them to do that to us means that I'm fairly certain that we're going to have that ability to meet the threshold for the federal government, and making sure these funds are spent properly to not only what we have promised council here tonight, but also to the federal government, making sure we're spending that in the correct format.
Mr. Tolet.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Have we taken into consideration having union representation from the city so that we're not stepping on toes or being in violation of any union agreements? If we're sanitizing, an example, again, hypothetical, if we're sanitizing fire stations 2 to 3 times a day at the end of each shift, or the police department, have we taken union consideration?
Through the chair to members of the committee, we are taking those steps this week. We wanted to see how this conversation went first in order to make sure we had things lined up. We have had some initial conversation mainly with ASME, and I actually had a few meetings scheduled this week with them to kind of discuss this idea with them. But a lot of these funds became available in the last few weeks, and so trying to understand the programming, understand the funding, figure out a plan for it, it's taken some time. But we will make sure that we do not violate any agreement on that, and we're going to make sure that people understand why we're doing this and making sure that we don't violate any of those agreements.
Thank you. Mr. Farrell, did you want to add anything more?
Mr. Chairman, if we are moving forward this evening, and this is through to the mayor and to Director Firestein, but the email that I received had 5 different departments within this fund, so I guess and we can work on this between now and, but, the one question I had, you have salaries, and on the one slide I saw was 560,000. Well, I think that's a little high based on the numbers that you and I discussed, Mr. Farstein. I think you sent me 248. I think the balance of that was for PPE, maybe?
Through the chair to members of the
Yeah, I can speak to that through you, Chair, and to the members of the committee. Thank you for that, Mr. Farrell. So the 248 number was specifically around this individual team, but the reason why we're asking for 560 is that there's a couple expenses we've already incurred as a city that we could look back, and these resources give us the chance to look back from March 1st and say, have we substantially dedicated someone due to the COVID-19? And if we have these resources allocated, if it becomes more flexible, it wouldn't necessarily go toward creating more people in this department, but we could start to look at other areas within our operations that have been changed toward mitigating the spread of COVID-19, and we can use those resources to pay for those wages and salaries. So having the allocation there gives us the ability to look at, all right, what other spaces in the city do we want to make a case for those staff being dedicated to mitigating COVID-19.
Mr. Farrell?
Yes, through you to the mayor and maybe to Justin. So we've been tracking this remote status for people that are working away from their desk or home away from their desk. And through pay period 15, we have a little over $900,000. And so probably a third of that is general fund monies, and some of that's muni court that we may already be reimbursing. But I guess my question would be, is that what you're referring to, Mayor? Some of that money we could maybe get back?
Exactly. So again, there's two categories of substantially different and substantially dedicated. And so that's why if we allocate it, we can start to have those conversations with the Office of Budget Management and with the Treasury and say, hey, we did this, is this eligible? It gives us that opportunity to have those conversations. And I want to give you a shout out for that too, Mr. Farrell, because y'all started tracking that from day one. And I remember wondering like, why are they tracking that? That's interesting. They're having folks track it. And now when these resources come, now it's like, oh, that's perfect that they tracked it, because now we have something to look back at and say, these people were directly impacted by this COVID-19. So definitely want to give you kudos for that.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. And it was, honestly, this was our hope that someday we would be able to get some of this money back. So if whatever piece of it we can, that's well needed.
Mr. Baird?
Yeah, just comment. I've always had the utmost trust in the finance director's office. They keep very close track of things. Decisions are made about what's eligible and what isn't in other areas, particularly for the general fund or the enterprise funds. This follows along that same line, and I think we're on the right track. And I think having this action team that you've talked about to discuss that and make sure what needs to be done in dealing with the employees is on the right track. So I'm very comfortable with it, and I'm willing to move ahead with it at this point. Thank you.
So I guess a question would be that I'm just kind of reviewing and looking at, if we dedicate these funds to these separate accounts, are we able to, if we feel there's a need in other areas or not a need in others, are we able to move some of those funds into an areas maybe we feel in a small business association, or is there opportunities like that? Once we dedicate the funds, we dedicate them. Mr. Baird?
Well, we always do transfer and reappropriation. This basically comes under that same handy, idea. So I don't think that's a problem, but it's a good question. Thank you.
Mr. Farrell?
Yeah, through you, Chairman, I'll just speak for someone who works at City Hall. Is there some infrastructure items here that we could do that maybe, say, touchless water in the restrooms or the back door?
Yeah.
I mean, just things like that before, there'll be plenty left for these other expenses too, but.
I mean, what is the plans, I guess, for the city? I mean, have we thought about the building in itself as far as making the improvements? You know, taking care of our own buildings too as well and upgrading them, those facilities. Is that all part of some of those opportunities that we're looking at to invest?
Through you, Chair, most definitely. I think that's a part of, as I mentioned before, our first priority is to want to make sure we get everything that we can digitized so that you know, those unnecessary trips to City Hall from the outside we take care of. And then if folks, you know, otherwise, and I'll let Mr. Brubaker speak to some of the details about how we're already starting to reconfigure City Hall to accommodate folks. But I love the idea that Mr. Farrell just shared around the motion generated hand washing. You know, we want to think about one of the things, you know, Jim Taylor brought up, our administrative legal counsel brought up was, you know, we hope to get out of this someday. So we have to be mindful of what type of capital expenditures we put in place for this temporary piece, but what type of changes might we want to make that will last long? And I think the one you just mentioned, Mr. Farrell, is a huge example of that. But Mr. Brubaker can speak to what we're already currently planning to do and how these expenses will help, or how these resources will help us.
Thank you, Mayor, and Mr. Chairman, through you to City Council. Several of the things that we've already done is, I know in public utilities, they went through a contractor and had some of the glass partitions put up downstairs, but for police department, the Muni Court, and several other departments here in City Hall, we've had several of our maintenance people that are in with these 6 people. They actually made some glass partitions. They went and bought the plexiglass. They made a nice plexiglass frame for it. They stained the wood, and it's over in Judge Bennett, Judge White, in Muni Court, over at the police department, in the building department, engineering. We've already got these. So they've been doing that over the last 3 or 4 weeks. One of the things we talked about and is in the process right now with Corey Henderson and Brian Rothgary is, how are we going to reconfigure our doors in this particular building? You can come in any door, you can go in anywhere in City Hall that you want. We really don't have a way to stop people. So what we've decided to do is we're using general fund money to do this, but it can be reimbursed through the COVID money, is we're redoing how we enter the doors. So when you come in these 2 back doors back here, and I don't want to belabor the point, but just so you have an idea, normally those 2 doors you have to have a key card to get into certain hours. At 7:45 every morning, they automatically unlock, and at 4:45 they relock, and then you need a key card to get in. What we're in the process of doing is rewiring that. So the general public will be able to access those 2 doors, and we'll have boxes set up for departments as we start to reopen. The key card will now be to get in the next set of 2 doors for employees and whatnot after hours. We're going to have a key card the same way set up on these 2 doors out here. Eventually, one of the things we're looking at to help public utilities and slow how many people do come into City Hall is kiosks, to be able to pay utility bills and that, where they can do that in those 2 hallways after hours. And those doors could be unlocked for the general public from, say, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and somebody could come in and pay their utility bill without actually accessing the main part of the building after hours. The same thing with the front doors. Front doors right now, I have to go down and physically lock or unlock those doors. Those are being set up to be key carded as well and be put on a system to where the doors will automatically lock, just like all the other doors in the building, so we don't have to physically go around and do that. We've talked about the entry, coming in, and how to direct people around, and setting up a table with a screen up so that when people come in, where would you like to go? And we can set them to those specific departments. So we have a plan that we're working to reopen, but it's going to take some of these COVID dollars to make that happen. I've also got Mr. Schneider from our maintenance team. He's reached out to several different entities about getting portable hand sanitizers where you don't have to touch anything, you just put your hand on it, it squirts the hand sanitizer. So when folks come into City Hall, they have that capability. We spend an exorbitant amount of money on PPEs, which this money can be reimbursed back to the city. I will tell you, since mid-March, we've expended about $250,000 in PPEs, masks, gloves, hand sanitizers, disinfectant. So all that can be done, and that's all available to our employees in many different departments. So we are doing a lot of different things already in place to help keep this building usable, the police station usable, and I do know that Muni Court, I just gave them a large amount of masks because I think they're going to be doing some different things with allowing the general public in moving forward as well. And again, they have those glass partitions also. So that's kind of some of the things that we've done beforehand and some of the things that this COVID money can do. And just to go back about the tracking, we already do that right now with CDBG funds in regards to like our building department. We pay our PMC people out of CDBG and general fund dollars. So they're tracking that every week. Now, we only have one down there right now because we had to move a couple out due to the budget, but prior to that, they were tracking their hours, and that gets submitted, and then the finance director's office knows where to pull money from the CDBG to pay those particular hours and the general fund dollars. So to add 6 more people to do that process is not that difficult. It's just getting the finance director's office and law director's office comfortable on that process. So I'll zip it.
Any questions for Mr. Brubaker regarding this? How were the dollar amounts accounted for as far as how did you break it out? What was the reasoning, or how did you determine that, Mayor?
Yeah, through your
For
chair.
each item.
Yeah, so I had Derek and Kevin really diving deep about some of the things they've mentioned in terms of looking at what staff has already been doing things, what would this new public property team look like, and that's how that number came. The next piece was really looking at small business and thinking about the need for a major investment, especially if we're going to be engaging with some of our major employers. As Dawn mentioned, we have the opportunity to engage. We've already been engaging with Crane and Ridge Tool, so we have a chance to kind of engage with some of those players that often get left out of this process. So wanting to have ample resources for that. And then in terms of the emergency financial assistance, when you hear Ms. Connor's presentation about utility delinquency, you'll see that there's a gap there in terms of what people can afford, and people are going to need more assistance than just the utility bills. They're also now I was talking to Councilman Sarah about this. Now people are going to be needing to pay their rent now, and because there's been that moratorium on rent, so we know there's going to be an increase in resources for that financial assistance. And then the last piece around the essential services, just with my background, kind of working in the social service space, kind of thinking about, all right, if we work with a group to do the digital literacy piece, if we work with a group on the food delivery piece, kind of thinking about how many of those we could do with these resources. That's how those chunks were established.
All right. Any other questions in regards to how this is set up for the mayor or Director Firestein, or questions in regards to that? I know these are opportunities that we have to look at and consider, and we want to make sure we're doing the right thing. That's been expressed clearly here tonight. So we just want to make sure that we have that. No? Oh, no? Okay. Nothing more? Okay, so we were having this for discussion at this particular time, but if this committee chooses to, if Law Director Deary wants to weigh in.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to say that as I view this, it's my understanding that this is on the agenda for discussion tonight. Obviously, it's the committee's prerogative how you wish to proceed. But so from where I sit, I think the big picture question as far as moving forward with the committee report is council, or the committee, I should say, ready to move forward and take a position on, you ready to approve these, I'll call them buckets, the buckets as they're laid out and the buckets as the money's allocated between each of them. And obviously, that's a question that each of you have to answer for yourselves, and if you're prepared to do that tonight. If you're prepared to do that tonight, then I would say that,
Right.
yeah, you're ready to go ahead and talk about a committee report.
I would think, Mayor, and I think if we could agree to this. So our next meeting is August the 3rd, our full council meeting. So I think if we can agree upon this, how about if we meet on August the 3rd prior to at 6:30? I think that gives us enough time to do a little bit of work beforehand, have some more conversations about it. So let's schedule a meeting for finance at 6:30 on August the 3rd, if that gives us enough time, and then have more discussions between now and then and act upon it. I'm just throwing that out there for the committee, if the committee would be okay with something like that, or if this committee wants to move forward with, I would feel more comfortable, and I think just because we have this information in front of us tonight, not that the administration has done a great job in explaining all this, and we've covered a lot of things, but I think it still gives us a little bit of time to still ask more questions and make a decision in regard to that. I don't know if, Mr. Tolet?
I am extremely comfortable with that, as long as we have that ability to reallocate as this progresses into September. That way, if ABC Corporation needed an extra 10,000 for their COVID, that we can reallocate from bucket D to bucket A come September or October. So I'm good with moving it on as set, as long as we have that flexibility moving forward.
Yeah. So if everybody feels comfortable with that, we could move forward with what we have tonight, or if this committee wants to meet right beforehand. I'm leaving it up to our committee. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 members of our committee here to do that. Mr. Baird?
Mr. Chairman, I'm fine with either way. If you're want a little extra time, I have no problem. I think we can, I don't think we're going to vary much, but if somebody has some questions, additional questions,
I think
there's nothing wrong with waiting.
No,
We've got
right.
time.
I would feel more comfortable with that, Mayor, and to the administration. Give us a little bit of more time, a little bit more dialogue. I know maybe some council members might not be here for the 3rd, but I think we can ask those questions in regards to that. So at this time, let's just kind of put it, we'll have a scheduled meeting regarding just the CARES Act, for a 6:30 meeting on August the 3rd in council chambers. And then,
We'll go ahead and prepare.
yeah, and we'll,
And so we'll be ready if it's appropriate to go forward.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
that's
Mayor, sorry, I realized my mic wasn't on. I was just saying to President Stewart that my office would go ahead and we would prepare proposed legislation, and it would, if it's appropriate, then it would be ready to go Monday night, just like if committee had acted tonight.
okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor, for the presentation, and then you and the Finance Director, or Mr. Farrell, and Mr. Firestein, and Mr. Brubaker, your efforts, Mr. McCauley. We'll get some things done. We'll get it happen. All right. We've considered the matter of inactive and delinquent utility accounts, a resolution approving the said attached list of said utility accounts to be certified and filed with Lorraine County Auditor's Office to be assessed as liens to the properties. Can I get a motion, get it on the floor?
So moved, Mr.
Moved by
Chairman.
Mr. Baird,
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Ms. Connor, if you'd like to come up.
Through you, Mr. Chair. There's 13 addresses here that were presented to the resolution board on 7/10, to be turned over for, non-payment. There are final bills that were on inactive accounts.
This is just kind of standard procedure that we're going through. Is there any further discussion regarding that? Mr. Tolet?
Through you, Mr. Chair, just for the record, these are not shut-offs. I just want to,
Right,
These are-
most of these either they're
I
vacant.
just want to make it
Vacant
so people
or
watching at
inactive.
home
Right.
understand.
Any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Thank you.
Item number 6, Mr. Farrell, you don't think we need to have that at this particular time, or?
Yes, Chairman, that can be removed.
Okay, item number 6 will be removed. Item number 7,
Well, I heard what I think I just heard. I'm going to be amending this exhibit prior to next week,
right.
because the appropriation changes that I have right now don't add any money into the local
It's all,
coronavirus.
it's how it's always presented here.
Yeah, numbers 2 and 3, I guess, would remain on there. And that's adding money to West River Road improvement and Abbey Road South improvement for the issue 2 portion
Okay.
of the resurfacing. I may still move some of this money in the general fund just to cover, in building and lands right now, we have no money left for the payroll for the people that were moved out of the parks and cemeteries fund, so I'm gonna need at least one payroll's worth of dollars, but I'll adjust this exhibit accordingly.
Right. All right. We've considered the matter of the 2020 permanent appropriation change in ordinance authorizing to amend ordinance 2020-38 per the permanent appropriation ordinance as per the attached. Can I get a motion?
So move.
Moved by Mr. Baird, second by Ms. Davis.
A little quicker.
Any discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. So just so that we're clear, that we'll have our finance meeting on August the 3rd at 6:30 in council chambers. So please have those communications with the mayor's office, his team, law director, finance director's office, so that we can kind of have some action taking place on August the 3rd. Yes, the meeting will be in council chambers. Mr. Brubaker, we like to have every shield all the way up around.
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman. I move we adjourn.
Moved by Mr. Baird,
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Any further discussion? Question's been called. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.